When injury takes you out of the game, it's time for your team to step up. At Allina Health Orthopedics, you'll get expert care backed by a whole health system of providers. With convenient locations, virtual options, and an app that gives you 24/7 access to your records, test results, and a care team, you're always close to the care that you need. Schedule now at allinahealth.org/ortho.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when this finds you. Welcome to the Sound of the Loons podcast presented by Allina Health Orthopedics. I'm Steve McPherson, and I'm once again joined by Cal Williams. I feel like it's been a little bit again, Cal, because we just had like two double game weeks back to back. It was a lot. There was a lot of stuff. I was just barely keeping my head above water. And then on top of that, it's gotten legitimately chilly here in Minnesota. We're now into the 30s and 40s, waking up and it being like freezing. So it's good soccer weather. It's a good time to go out there and run a lot. So it's good. I presume you don't have to do any yard work where you are, Cal. I have a yard and I have a lot of leaves, and I never know what to do with the leaves because I've heard you shouldn't rake them, like that they're natural, they will decompose, it will make your grass better, but that also just kind of looks garbagey in the spring. Like I find myself, when people are like, you don't have to rake your leaves, I'm like, is this the same way that people are like, you don't have to use deodorant? Because you have to use deodorant. Like I understand people that are like, it's cool, you're natural, but no, you smell. Like, use deodorant. So I don't know where I fall on the side of this debate, but maybe it's something you've never had to worry about since I believe you don't have a yard.
Yes, no. If ever we do have to worry about anything, the people at the apartment complex take care of it. So we don't really. And our little balcony looks over a really lovely yard and what have you. But yeah, most mornings now people are there. People who I'm assuming are working in the building are there raking up leaves, and I've been woken up by a windblower or two over the course of the last week for sure, or a leaf blower, whatever you guys call them here.
Yeah.
And
Do they call them wind blowers in England? Is that
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I could have just made that up, but I think so. Yeah, I'd not heard the term leaf blower until I came here.
Sure.
But it makes sense. It's very, very obvious as to what it is. A wind blower. That doesn't really make much sense, does it?
I don't know.
You're blowing a bit of wind, like yeah. Anyway, so
Sounds a little
I've been
rude.
woken up by several of those over the last week or so, because they tend to do it at sort of 6 or 7 in the morning, and hey ho. But no, we don't have to worry about any of that. But the one thing which I have noticed is particularly when I come back from watching Minnesota United training up at the facility, I will notice now that there are an abundance of leaves on our floor because I've dragged them in on my feet,
Mm-hmm.
and a shed load of grass as well. Our apartment is just now covered in green grass, and it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. My wife is furious, and she has every right to be. So I've got to do a better job of, making sure that doesn't happen. But yeah, no. To answer the question, Steve, no, we're all good. We don't have to worry about that. I'm assuming it's the complete polar opposite for you.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I drag leaves in. I also have two smaller human beings who live in my house who drag plenty of leaves into the house on their feet. They also, the other thing they do is they have, when they come home from school, sand in their sneakers. And if you don't make them take the sand out, they take it off and it creates a pile of dust. It's like a cartoon pile of sand. Like I'm like, how did you have this much sand in your shoes? It would have driven me crazy if I had that in my shoes. So you have to make sure they go outside, and then when they knock them to knock the sand out, it's like you can hear the sand falling. Like that's how much sand is in there. So
wow.
yeah. So this is starting the time of year between the leaves, grass clippings, sand. Soon it will be mud and snow and grossness and all that. It's just, I prefer the time of year in the summer when you can just come in and not worry about what you're tracking in, essentially. That's much preferable. Speaking of coming in with tracking a bunch of crap, along with Minnesota United came into Sunday's game against SKC, really needing to win after a not great showing on Wednesday. Look at that transition. We just did it real naturally. Let's talk about that win over SKC. It's got to be one of the best wins of the year in terms of the timeliness and coming from behind, defeating a team that was the top seed in the Western Conference at that moment. A team that obviously Minnesota United has been better at Allianz Field against Sporting Kansas City since its early days, but still, Sporting is never a team that you want to take lightly. It's got to be up there for this season, I would think.
Yeah, I would agree in the sense that it's probably up there in terms of one of the most important results. Um, Performance-wise, it was good. I think Minnesota didn't go up against the best version of Sporting Kansas City, if I'm being totally honest, Steve. I think they started really well in rip-roaring fashion, obviously scored inside 8 minutes. And I was a little bit worried then, Steve, because after that, I thought, right, well, obviously Minnesota now have to open up a little bit more. Obviously, I hadn't seen training or anything that week. I was away. I wasn't doing the game, and I wasn't really. I was none the wiser in terms of what the approach was going to be. But I had my own assumptions, and my thought was, I can absolutely see Minnesota being a little more disciplined, sitting back, inviting and absorbing a little more pressure, and hitting on the counter attack. I could see that for sure. And so when Kansas City scored in the opening 7 minutes, I thought, this could be really problematic now because it means Minnesota have to open up a little bit more and they have to force the issue because they have to go and win this game.
Mm-hmm.
But credit where credit's due, Steve. I thought the showing of character from the home side was wonderful. It was obviously a decent goal to get them back into it. I still think Tamile should probably save it, to be honest, a goalkeeper of his standard. I must admit, I was surprised when I saw Fragapane hit it, and he strikes it beautifully, by the way. But when it hit it almost hit the palm of Tamile's right hand, and it didn't. It wasn't saved. I thought to myself that a goalkeeper of that standard usually makes the save there, and he didn't. It sort of crept underneath or maybe just above. It wasn't quite as commanding as he usually is. But look, nevertheless, Minnesota won't care. They won't care. Just get back into the game however you can, and they did that. And I thought they showed tremendous resiliency by doing that and getting back on the board as quickly as they could. And then they seem to grow in confidence. I mean, how many times have we been told, Steve, that goals change games? And yeah, it does sort of warrant a laugh with a lot of people up here now, but it is absolutely so true. Because and I'll go back to the prior game against Vancouver, Steve, when Unu was unlucky when he hit the post, and then Vancouver go and literally a minute later score the second goal to all but seal the 3 points. Had Unu have scored that goal, it's a completely different game. So goals do change games. And so it was obvious then when Minnesota got themselves back into it, I thought, right, you've got a chance here. And they did grow in confidence. Reynoso, again, I thought was superb. The way that he operates on the ball, but certainly off the ball as well, Steve. There's one or two issues that he causes off the ball, which I'll get into at some stage when it's necessary. But certainly from an attacking point of view, the way that he pulls, and we mentioned this on our other podcast earlier in the week, that if Reynoso was able to pull the singular six out, which he did several times, there would be room for Unu to drop in and play it out wide, and Minnesota will be able to start an attack of some sort. And that happened on multiple occasions. So I think you have to give real credit, Steve, because Minnesota came into that game knowing they had to win. It was absolute. We've used the term must win for the last sort of 6 or 7 weeks now, but that was legitimately you have to win this. You have to, because otherwise your chances of getting into the postseason are very slim indeed. So I thought it was a great showing of character under pressure, and I put out on social media, Stephen, and I'm sure you want to go into this a bit later on, but the Panenka from Reynoso was sublime, and to have the bottle to do that in that situation. It was wonderful. His little trick was really a treat, wasn't it? It was wonderful to watch, and I genuinely think it for me that and not that I've ever doubted Reynoso, because he's by far and away the best player Minnesota have. But in those moments, that's when you need those players that are full of experience and have been in major pressurized situations in the past, like Reynoso has, playing for Boca Juniors in front of 50, 60,000 at La Bombonera, and playing in front of fans that it's their livelihood, and I know there are fans here that will view the team the same as well, but that there's a bit more veracity at times with those in South America, with the fans in South America. And if you end up losing the game, you'll know about it for a week or two, and that there's real pressure down there playing for Boca Juniors. And I thought Reynoso was about as calm as they came. And in my opinion, his experience showed in that moment. His confidence showed in that moment. And that, Steve, that is why you paid the money for somebody like Emmanuel Reynoso to deliver in those massive moments that really matter.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's interesting. Well, let's get to Reynoso next. I'm going to speak to the first part because then we can transition to talking about other game stuff later on. But Cal, maybe talking about the must-win situation. I think a fair number of Minnesota United fans wouldn't mind requiring a little less grit and determination all the time, which obviously is it's a signature character of this team in a lot of ways. But as you've often said before, like we just can't make it easy. Like it can't ever be, like coming into a game where you're out of the playoffs, you don't even fold. You have to push us back into the playoffs so that we have to go into the final day, on tenter hooks again, like waiting to see what's going to happen. We can't ever go quietly into that good night. Just when you think Minnesota United is out, they come back in, and it's great and it's maddening. It's sort of both things at the same time, and I think that it's fun to watch and it's exciting to watch. And it also is not great for your blood pressure. With regard to Reynoso and that question of like, it's an interesting thing with him because I think that you see a guy who is young. That's another thing that we often don't really remember with Reynoso is he's not, you look at like having a guy like Kevin Molino or somebody who came in and he was sort of late 20s, hitting that prime. How do you take that next step up? We had Darwin Quintero come in. He was obviously sort of late prime or maybe just past his prime. We have a bunch of guys who are good. And we've talked about this before with acquiring players like Ramon Metenier and Bakay Debasi, who are still extremely quality players who just, they've sort of done everything they can do in another league somewhere else. And they're going to come here and be very good for us. Reynoso is in that mid 20s, becoming who he's supposed to be. He came from a situation in which he wasn't the number 10. He wasn't the guy, even though he was in a higher pressure situation overall in terms of, the idea of soccer culture in South America, he hadn't really had to be that guy yet. And now he's being asked to be that guy. And I think we're seeing him mature. I mean, there's never been a question of his talent or his ability. It's a question of how do you leverage that into leadership, into, sort of being calm in the face of adversity, like as we saw when he took that penalty shot. It's a skill set in the same way that, nutmegging a guy is a skill set. It's a thing you develop over time. It's a thing that, other players on the team have, but they're not that star guy. Ozzy Alonso has brought a lot of gravitas to the team, experience and understanding that he's going to make the playoffs. He's not going to let any team that he's on knock into the playoffs. I think you see some of that at different times from Michael Buxall. I think you see it from Will Trapp as far as sort of that leadership on the field. The question is like, how much can Reynoso do that as well? Not just be like, hey, you're the great highlight reel player out there, but you're a guy who is really like the bellwether of the team and sort of the guy who determines what the feel and the tenor of the team is on the field. And I think it's still happening. And I think we're beginning to see it right now, Cal.
I think with Reynoso, Steve, he sets the standard. And if he has a bad game, it's more often than not that the team doesn't particularly perform very well. It's obviously great having a player of that stature. At times, it can be a bit of an issue because of, as I said, if he doesn't perform well, it limits the team at times. I'm not saying Minnesota United are limited because there's other great players on the team and we've seen them win on other occasions without Reynoso. And I think it was right after the 0-4 start. I think there was a situation where Reynoso didn't play a couple of games, and I think it was good for the group from a confidence perspective and a psychological point of view that they proved they could win without Reynoso. But regardless of that, you always want somebody like that on the field when they're available. He's first class, Steve. He's so agile as well. The one thing I've noticed with him over the last couple of games is the way that he uses his body as well. I don't know if this is something that he's worked on, but I've noticed over the last sort of 7 or 8 games, there's been times when he just sort of leans one way and because he's shielding the ball, that there's nothing the opposing player can do about it, and he just sort of almost leans into space.
Mhm.
He's so agile the way that he moves. He's obviously light-footed. We've seen him almost twinkle-toed over the course of his time at Minnesota United. I legitimately think, Steve, and I'm not looking at this through black and blue tinted glasses. People sort of, I think they know how I operate by now, and um, I genuinely think there's a case for him to be labelled um, as maybe not the best, but certainly one of the very best number 10s in Major League Soccer right now. I think about it, and I think about who else is important across the league in terms of number 10s, and the only other one that really sticks out to me where you think, right, without him, they are a bit of a different team, and that's Lucas De La Rejan at Columbus Crew.
That's what I was gonna say,
The
actually.
other,
Yeah.
like don't get me wrong, there's some other really good number 10s in this league,
Mhm.
like Nicolas Lodero, for example, but the Sounders have sort of proven this year that they can play without him if they need to.
Mhm.
There's been a couple of examples. I'm trying to think off the top of my head now, but
I
um,
mean, Pozuelo obviously great, but
Pozuelo,
Toronto's been in disarray, so
yeah,
it hasn't come
it's
together, so.
correct. And the other one that I think has given a good
Field,
account of
Carlos
himself
Field.
recently is Ryan Gauld as well. But see,
Mhm.
the thing about Carlos Gil, Steve, is that he can also play in wide positions as well. I
Sure.
don't think he's just restricted to it. And I'm not, by all means, I'm not saying Reynoso is limited, because we've seen as well he's more than capable of playing in a inverted wide position in a 4-3-3. But Carlos Gil can legitimately play it in wide positions as well, and
Yeah.
he's done that before he came to the Revs.
Yeah. Well, and Heel
So
has Buxa and Bo up there as well. So when you have two guys, with that kind of scoring pedigree who are doing that well in front of you, you can be the guy who is like, I'm the playmaker. Like, and his numbers make him look like a real number 10 right now, because he's taken
yes,
a gajillion corner kicks, he's delivered a gajillion assists. Doesn't hurt to have Buxa and Bo playing the way they're playing right now for that.
no, not at all. And this is a great argument, Steve. It's a great point in terms of, and again, I say this with all due respect, but you have to wonder if Minnesota United had a centre forward up front that had scored sort of 15, 16 goals, like Buxa and Bo have combined this year. You
Hmm.
you wonder what those numbers would look like for Reynoso this year. I think
Yeah.
it's what is it, 10 assists prior to the
Yep.
Kansas City game. Um, I wonder if there was a natural centre forward up front. I seriously think that could have been doubled this year. He's been that good.
Yeah, it could as easily be up in that. I think Carlos Hill is up in the 15, 16 range, somewhere around there. And so like it could easily be up in that territory, Cal. Let's talk about the sort of let's talk about the Panenka. Let's start with the Panenka first,
Mm.
because that was a fun thing. And I also had not gotten a chance to do a Beyond the Box article for a while, because of how quick the games have been coming in, just filling in those things. But this was a chance, and I was like, we're going to talk about the Panenka, because I bet there's at least some people out there who saw that happen and were like, what the hell is he doing? Like kicking it slow down the middle of the goal. It's fun. The Panenka is great. It was invented by Antonín Panenka, who is a
Mm.
Czech player, and he was in the 76 Euros, and he did it to beat West Germany. And it's fun because the thing that it reminds me of is that, and you and any of our listeners knows as well as I do, that I'm interested in analytics, I'm interested in expected goals, I'm interested in new ways to think about the game and all this stuff like that. A lot of analytics drives you towards efficiency, effectiveness, better output for less input, sort of tactically doing the most you can with what you have. The Panenka is like not any of that. It's like, I'm styling on you. There's obviously a strategic element to it, as far as, if you kick it hard down the middle, there's more of a chance they're going to block it by the goalkeeper simply still being there. There's something about letting the goalkeeper get all the way out of the position and then it's moving slowly. But I mean, let's not make any mistake. You're trying to embarrass somebody, and it's great when it works. I mean, and it made me think of back in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. I remember people talking about Dominic Wilkins, who played for the Atlanta Hawks, and how his dunks were so powerful it was like they were worth more than 2 points. And I think the Panenka has an element of that. Not that it's so powerful, but that when you do that, it can be very demoralizing, like in a way that just a straight up scored penalty isn't. It can really feel like I mean, it can also go really bad.
Mm.
You can chip it right to the goalkeeper. That's not a good look, Ali Adnan. So, is a guy I remember doing that. Tell me about your Panenka experience. It's wild that this was the first successful penalty for Minnesota the entire season. Also,
Yeah.
Ramon Avila had attempted one before and then scored on the rebound, but he had not scored the penalty. It's crazy that this was the first penalty, and then that it's a Panenka. It might be the last penalty of the regular season, the first and only, if nothing happens at LA. So
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's a wild stat, isn't it? As you quite rightly say, Steve. And again, I think Minnesota have been incredibly unlucky in front of goal this season. No doubt they've not been clinical enough, and we've spoken about that several times, and everyone knows that. But in the penalty box, there's been several times this year I thought they've been really unlucky not to get a penalty. The Panenka is something that whenever it happens, Steve, and it's successful, I always think to myself, "You cheeky little so and so," because
yeah.
it just takes so much courage. I would never, ever, ever do that in a situation like that, Steve. First of all, I was never good enough to do that, but um, I would just want to hit it as hard as possible, give the goalkeeper zero chance. But clearly, it's an indication of how confident Reynoso is right now to pull something like that off in a game of that magnitude as well. Um, and as you say, we've seen it go wrong before. And you can, as you quite rightly say, that the aim, I think, is obviously to score first and foremost. But yeah, there's an added element of you want to embarrass the goalkeeper, you want to show how good you are. Um, and we've seen it go wrong before. It can absolutely go from you trying to embarrass to you absolutely being embarrassed, because there's nothing worse in that moment, Steve, when the goalkeeper just stands flat and just catches the ball. And
Yeah.
what a tremendous waste of a penalty kick that is,
Yeah.
And so it's gone wrong so many times. So when he pulled it off, I must admit I squealed. Um, I couldn't believe he did it. I couldn't believe he had the courage to do it in that situation. But again, this is what I put it out on social media, Steve, and I completely cannot say this enough. This is why you invest in players like him, because he's confident, he's calm in these big pressurized situations. It looked like it was just a training ground activity to him.
Mhm.
It was crazy. Steve, you wouldn't try that in your backyard playing with your kids, like it just it's just the absurdity of doing it in that moment was wild. So the one thing it does do, Steve, is it confirms that we have an awfully confident number 10 right now. And you have to say there's no better time heading into the postseason to have somebody like him playing at the top of his game.
Yeah, obviously we won't know until things go forward, Cal. We won't know until the game against the Galaxy. We won't know until the postseason, sort of what fruit a moment like that can bear. But I think that if you think back to, in some ways, it reminded me of Vito Manone stoning, Ryan Hollingshead. Was it Hollingshead or was it?
No, it was the
No,
Swiss centre back.
yeah. What was his name?
Reto Ziegler.
Yeah, Ziegler, right? Okay, Ziegler. He was, yeah, because he was so that penalty save at the last minute, just after a goal, it sort of had this talismanic moment. I think it was sort of a talismanic moment for that team in 2019. That was like, again, in a situation that's a penalty, your goalkeeper sort of stepping up and stopping a penalty at a moment when you need it so badly. There's something to be said for, again, just sort of that emotional lift. Like, again, this is where I think, who knows what the analytics say? Who knows what the stats say? Who knows what any of this means? But going into a postseason, going into a decision day matchup that you're going to need to win. I mean, it's pretty simple at this. We'll get into it after the read, but like, you win and you're basically determine your destiny. So you need to do this right now. Going into that, that's got to be huge. Before we leave this game, I would be remiss if we didn't mention the non-red card for Amadou Dia, which was, it seems like, universally disgusting. People are just like, what the hell? And why was this not called or reviewed, or what is going on here? I have my own feelings. What did you see there?
The card should have been as red can be. It's the absolute definition of a red card, Steve. And I tell you what, as well, Reynoso is very, very lucky he's not done some serious damage there, because when you go back and you're having a look at the replay, you see his knee sort of twist and the ankle twist as well.
Yeah.
He's very fortunate he's not had any major damage. I was up at Blaine at the training facility today, and he wasn't doing much, but he was still running around and he was knocking the ball around and seemed to be okay. There was no concern real. Adrian Heath has said to
Mhm.
the press that he's got a couple of bumps and bruises, I'm sure, from
Sure.
that tackle and one or two others, but he seemed to be okay. But he's extremely lucky there, Steve, because we have seen a lot less go a lot further punished in this league in particular as well.
Yeah.
For me, that's a red card all day, every single day. It wouldn't surprise me if the professional referees organization and Major League Soccer themselves go back and award a red card at a later date and say, yeah, sorry, dear, you can't play the last game of the
Yeah.
season or something like that, or one of their last two games of the season, which doesn't do Minnesota United any good, but that there has to be punishment, there has to be accountability. And that for me, Steve, was an absolutely rancid, wretched challenge. That there's no time for a tackle like that in our game, and all Dia is trying to do there is slow Reynoso down, is stop him in his tracks. I don't know if he's good, if he's doing it on purpose, if he's trying to injure Reynoso. I don't think so. I struggle to believe that players actually are out there that do that. Unless they're genuinely, they might have a screw loose, and that there's one or two out there for sure across world football. But I struggle to believe that Dia purposely went into to injure Reynoso. I think he went in to stop him purposely, which by the letter of the law is a yellow card. But this was far more severe than just somebody being stopped in their tracks. It was genuinely endangering the safety of opponents. Of an opponent, and for me, that is absolutely, Steve, about as red as they come in terms of the color of the card. It's a red card all day, and like I said, it wouldn't surprise me if somebody at the league says to Kansas City in a couple of days, "Sorry, we're going to suspend him because the tackle was awful."
Yeah, Cal. I mean, I think that if you look back to, obviously it was rescinded right later, but if you think back to when Reynoso got that red card for what was just an accident, it was they going for the ball. Like nobody thought that was going to be a red card. You pull the red card for that. To not pull the red card for this seems crazy to me. It would be great if we found out that they had reviewed it. It would feel like there was a certain sense of justice and a certain sense of responsibility going on here. It probably won't trouble SKC that much to lose Dia for the next game because he's played the fewest minutes on the entire
Right.
roster, which is one of the things that like I have brought up, and I'm not like accusing anybody of anything. To me, I'm a little bit like, okay, you're down one goal to a team that needs to win this game, and that is winning this game right now and is hopefully heading for a postseason berth. And they, you put in Amadou Dia, who's barely played, and you could see both he and Barber, who are both have not played very many minutes at all, hounding Reynoso down that right side, like for the rest of that game. And it's fine. You're putting guys and you're like, listen, you got to stop this guy. Like, we got to stop this from going any further. You got to stop him. I don't know if there's any other kinds of instructions that are given, but it's like, it might have just been at least negligent. I don't know that it was on purpose, that Diaz, but there's sort of this thing called depraved heart, which is a clause for when now I'm talking about murder here, which is a little more excessive than what happened. But this idea that there's something between something being accidental and something being intentional, and it's acting in a way in which you don't really care if the consequences are dire. And I wonder about that, in that kind of behavior for Dia, that like, it's, he's not trying to hurt Reynoso, but he is going in hard in a way that's like, well, if he gets hurt, he gets hurt. And that's
Right.
that's sort of the way it goes. And that's, it's a little frustrating to see. It just, it's just one of those things you're never going to figure out like what actually happened there, but at least a red card and a suspension for Dia, Cal, would be some sense of justice, I think, going forward.
Yeah, and look, the tackle was almost unapologetic, really, wasn't it? In the sense of how rugged and how abrasive it was. I don't think there was any need for it, really. But I think there should probably be an apology from Amadou Dia in there as well. It won't come, it won't happen,
No.
and I understand why. But
he also, I will say, if you watch the replay, he did not give a crap about it. Like, he slid in and he pointed, he's like, we have possession, first of all, and then he just stood up and started walking away. And then as soon as the ref pulled the yellow card, all the Minnesota players around him were yelling at him, but he's just like, there wasn't that sort of thing of, oh crap, sorry, like, that wasn't great. He just was like, which sort of also makes me feel like, oh, okay, that's your job. It's like a hockey enforcer or something like that.
He knew what he was doing for sure.
Yeah, for sure. All right. When injury takes you out of the game, maybe you're getting slide tackled aggressively by Amadou Dia. It's time for your team to step up. At Allina Health Orthopedics, you'll get expert care backed by a whole health system of providers. With convenient locations, virtual options, and an app that gives you 24/7 access to your records, test results, and care team, you're always close to the care you need. Schedule now at allinahealth.org/ortho. All right. Let's talk about what's coming up in the next week. It's a lot. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about seeds 4 through 8 in the playoffs, essentially, and where we are. Now, I wrote down a bunch of stuff, and I'm just going to go through it. I don't even know if any of it makes sense at this point. It's wild, okay? To get to the 4th seed for Minnesota United, which is not, out of the realm of possibility to host a playoff game, you do have to have the Timbers lose or draw their next 2 games. And then if they draw them both, you'd have to beat the Galaxy by at least 2 goals, I think, to win out on goal differential. So you have to beat the Galaxy by 2 goals on the road, and Portland would have to lose or draw to Austin FC at home, which doesn't seem likely to happen. So I'm not particularly sanguine on getting that 4th spot. It's not impossible. If Vancouver beat LAFC at home tonight, Vancouver goes to 4th. If LAFC beat Vancouver, they would jump to 7th on goal differential. So that would change some of that stuff there. If RSL beat Portland on Wednesday, along with Vancouver winning, that pushes the Galaxy into the 8th spot, and Minnesota would then be 7th. And then you're going to queues up a decision day battle for that final playoff spot, essentially there. If Minnesota beat the Galaxy on the road, they're basically good. LAFC can't catch them even with 2 wins. So that would be 50 points. Minnesota would get to 51 points. So if LAFC win both games, they still will be below Minnesota United. So you're basically good if you beat the Galaxy. The final 3 teams in there, seeds 5, 6, 7, are going to be some combination of Portland, which is not super likely. I believe, according to 538, they have a 79% chance of being the 4th seed at this point. It's a pretty solid chance that Portland are going to be fine. But some combination of Portland, Vancouver, RSL, Minnesota, and the Galaxy. So it's going to be some combination of those. Probably Vancouver, RSL, Minnesota, and LA. One of them will get bounced out of the playoffs. This is insanity. According to 538, Minnesota United have the highest chance of finishing 5th. So where they are right now is 5th. They have a 27% chance of finishing 5th. About even chances of finishing 6th, 7th, or 8th. About 20% chance of each of those things happening. 19, 20%, 21% chance. So there's, a 1 in 5 chance that they miss the playoffs. But overall, there's a better chance of making the playoffs than not making the playoffs. But this is MLS. We've seen crazier things happen than Austin FC upsetting Portland at home, like on the final day of the season. Like, who knows? This is why we're here. It's because every game up until this game has been the most important game of Minnesota United season, and it just wouldn't be right if it didn't end with another most important game of Minnesota United season.
It's just the most enthralling race for the playoffs I've ever seen, Steve. It is absolutely possible that a 9th place LAFC could still be in the playoffs. It is absolutely possible that at the moment, the team in 4th, Portland, could absolutely have a major, major problem and fall out of the playoffs. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this before, Steve. And like I said, it's great to watch, but I wouldn't want to be a member of the coaching staff right now because I can't imagine they're getting much sleep. But this is why we love this time of year, Steve, in terms of the playoffs and the importance of essentially every single pass and kick and goal and what have you. It is so important. Everything really, really matters now. And this is also a really good argument for why the playoffs are a thing as well. Sometimes you get people saying, we prefer the league look more like the leagues in Europe and what have you. This is a good argument as to say, well, actually, here in North America, this is actually much better from an entertainment perspective, and I completely agree.
Yeah,
and I know the counter argument there is, well, the Champions League race, Europa League race, all that. I get that, but the playoffs are the be all and end all in American sports, in North American sports, and to have it as as tight as it is right now is tremendously entertaining. And honestly, Steve, somebody asked me over the weekend what I thought was going to happen, where I thought people would finish. I have no idea, like absolutely no idea.
Yeah.
And you try and map it out. If you know, it's just impossible. The only thing I will say is that I do think, despite your theory of MLS is crazy and anything could happen, which I agree with. I do see Portland thumping Austin on the last day of the
Yeah.
season,
I
meaning that
agree.
they'll solidify fourth and there won't be an issue there. Um, but in terms of the remaining five teams that have playoff possibilities, I have no idea. Minnesota could finish fifth and end up going to Portland. They could finish seventh and end up going to Seattle or Kansas City. Maybe they finish sixth and end up going to Colorado. Maybe they finish eighth and don't even enter the playoffs at all. Like, no one has any idea, Steve.
Yeah.
And this is why we love this time of year, because it is tremendously enthralling. And honestly, Steve, if I could fast forward time now, I would to Sunday, because I can't wait for it. I love decision day in itself. Is a the idea of decision day is great, but the fact that again here we are with legitimately another really decisive day for Minnesota United for the third year running,
Yeah.
it's wonderful. It's really really entertaining, and I can't wait, because obviously the opponents LA Galaxy need a win as well. So it legitimately will be really entertaining, Steve. I can't wait for Sunday.
Yeah, I think that, in terms of the way the league is structured right now, Cal, it's really they've hit a good balance. It'll remain to be seen how it proceeds over time. But I think with, the supporter shield is still obviously a big deal. And then I think that the single elimination playoff format they went to has helped, because I think that brings a little more in line with North American sports, like the NFL and things like that.
Yes.
Obviously, some other sports have series, but it's like the two games was seemed like a weird fit, I think, for how to follow sports and how quickly you can just, like, the single elimination, like, it goes fast and it makes the playoffs exciting, and every week there's like, this is it. Like, every game is all to play for, which is great. So it's got a good balance right now. I mean, I'd love to see the US Open Cup, come back and do more again. That's also a great thing to watch. What do you think? Here's what I'll ask. What matchup do you want as far as a first round playoff matchup, if you got to pick for Minnesota United amongst, let's say, those top four, because who knows what could happen in the last day? Seattle, Kansas City, Colorado, or Portland? What do you think? What team would you want to face?
It's either away Portland or away Colorado, and the only reason I say away Colorado is just because they seem to be as comfortable on the road as they are away. There's not really any major
8 wins either way. 8 wins at home.
Yeah, there's not really any, like, when you go to Portland, it's like, oh, it's Providence Park, it's difficult. Whereas with Colorado, it's like Dick's Sporting Goods Park, not particularly a fabulous atmosphere. The altitude thing will also play its part for sure, but but also this year, in my opinion, Robin Fraser's done an amazing job. So if you're asking me to absolutely pick one, Steve, I would say Minnesota has probably got as good a chance as anybody of winning on the road in a place they already have this year, which is Portland. So I would actually say, if you're asking for the perfect scenario, I think it would be Minnesota finishing fifth and playing the fourth seeded Portland Timbers away. I mean, look, the perfect scenario would be Minnesota finishing fourth, wouldn't it? But
sure.
let's just assume that won't happen.
Yeah.
So I think away to Portland, Minnesota match up tactically better against Portland than the other teams. So I would go with that, Steve. But regardless, wherever they end up, it's still going to be so supremely tough. It's not easier to win on the road in this league, Steve, and given the circumstances as well. Portland Timbers is a vibrant place. You've been to Providence Park a number of times. It's a soccer city. It really is, and people absolutely legitimately love Portland Timbers, and the atmosphere absolutely, much like it does at Allianz Field, plays its part. But in terms of pushing all of that aside, I think tactically, I think Minnesota can get the better of Portland Timbers out of any of those top four. So I would say that the best outcome assuming that Minnesota can't finish fourth, would be away to Portland Timbers.
Yeah. Yeah, I think tactically we've seen over the last, couple of years that I think Portland has, no team is an easy win, and Portland is certainly not an easy win, but we've seen Minnesota figure out how to play against Portland, both at Providence Park and at Allianz Field. I think that there's a blueprint there. In some ways, I feel like there's a better blueprint against Kansas City than Colorado right now. And that's, you never really, and that's not just because Minnesota won, was it 3-0 at Children's Mercy Park last year in the playoffs. That's a different Kansas City team. It's a different Minnesota United team. It just seems like, based on playing them recently, Minnesota United has something of a way to deal with Kansas City that I haven't really seen with Colorado in the same way. I mean, Colorado's just, again, it's like their depth across the whole field. Jack Price is a murderer. Like, it's brutal. They bring guys like, Cole Bassett in off the bench sometimes. There's a lot there, and they're really tough. And it's, they have a very good goalkeeper in William Yarbrough right now. Obviously, Tim Melia is not no slouch. He didn't have a great game against Minnesota United, but in some ways, I think the blueprint is better for playing Kansas City. But, it could be Vancouver. Like, right. Vancouver has 2 games to play. It could be Minnesota going to Vancouver. Like, who knows? It's complete insanity, Cal.
It is complete carnage, isn't it, Steve? It really is. And can you imagine that? Yeah, if we end up going to Vancouver, it would just be insane, wouldn't it, having just been there as well.
Yeah.
But maybe that would be a good thing, having understood how they play and what the expectations are. Maybe that would be a good thing. Who knows? But Vanni Sartini has got them playing some lovely stuff right now.
Seriously.
Very, very high pressing. It is quite blue collar, no holds barred type football, and I think he should get the job, by the way, if they get into the playoffs. I know he wants it. That's what he sort of said to us, is that if they get into the playoffs, he's going to be knocking on the door of the GM saying, well, I want this job. And he has every right to do so, and I hope he gets it. But that would be quite the trip as well for Minnesota. But honestly, Steve, right now, as I said earlier on, somebody asked me over the weekend what I think is going to happen. I have no idea. And that in itself is the beauty of it all.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave previewing the game up to you guys on the match preview show dealing with the LA Galaxy, because I know
thanks,
you have
great, thanks for that. Yeah,
I don't really want to even dive into it right now. Here's what I have to say about Vanni Sartini. Having seen him, he has that annoying older European man quality of, like, if he were an American, you'd be like, this guy looks kind of like a nerd or a dork, but he's Italian, so he looks cool. Like, he was wearing like jeans and a button-down shirt, and I was just like, so obnoxiously, like, offhandedly, like, stylish. For like a guy who just, anyways, Vanni Sartini, Vanni Sartini for president. I say put him in there. If they make the postseason after the way Vancouver has looked over the last several years, like, they'll be doing a good job. So everybody, if you want to find out about the LA Galaxy, you have to listen to Kendra and Cal talk about it, because I'm not even going to touch that. Who even knows? Thanks for joining us for the 160-second Sound of the Loons podcast, presented by Allina Health Orthopedics. Be sure to leave us a nice review on iTunes, or at the very least, a 5-star rating, and follow the team on Twitter at MNUFC. You can follow Cal at CalWilliamsCom, and you can follow me at Steve Entris. Apologies, as always, to Richard Wagner. And remember, there's only one person in this whole world like you, and my dog, who's barking. He's been barking through this whole podcast. I don't know if you can hear it, but he's an idiot. He was down here, and then he went upstairs, and now he's upstairs barking because he wants to come downstairs, but he's old and he won't come downstairs. There's only one dog in this world like my dog, and people can like you exactly as you are.